This week on The Other Side.
Australian men are getting screwed in every way except the way they'd really like.
We cut through the PR hype and take a look again at the real status of domestic violence, violence against men, and the growing issue of vexatious accusations. Riots in Melbourne as radical peace protesters make their point with violence. Big government's latest attack on your privacy and liberty, and the hypocrisy of Albo trying to keep kids safe online while exposing them to worrying material offline. The woman who wants to be Prime Minister having a shocker of a month, and the ABC acting like a PR arm of the Labor Party with your taxpayer money again. This is The Other Side. G'day Melbourne, g'day Adelaide, g'day Australia. This is The Other Side for the weekend commencing Friday the 13th of September 2024. I'm Damien Curry. This is The Other Side, your weekly analysis of the best news and commentary to get you smart for the weekend and the week ahead without the woke. With a new show dropping on YouTube every Friday night at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Time. Our bias is centre-right, good old-fashioned, everyday, common-sense Aussie values, and we are fully transparent about our political perspective. We have another bias, and that is towards facts and data, and a funny little thing we used to call the truth in journalism. Let's go. Gee, what a surprise. Protests in Melbourne led by leftist thugs got violent this week. Peace protests getting violent in a flash. Funny that. Channel 7 Melbourne reporter Paul Dowsley was in the thick of it on 7's morning show on Wednesday.
Oh, just behind us here. And this is what I mean. Out of nowhere, there will be a sudden rush. More capsicum spray. To let this man through here, presumably. This man, who's covered as a police officer down there, has fallen down. But this man, it's a police officer who's fallen down, but he's back up again. But this attendee has been let through. Lord, please.
The protesters were from the radical far-left communist group Socialist Alliance and pro-Palestinian activists, all fully supported by the Greens, the political party that astoundingly now claims 13% of the primary vote in this country, according to the latest polls. 13% and rising. That's how stupid and politically ignorant our fellow citizens on the other side of politics have actually become.
42 protesters were arrested during the clashes, which saw police use pepper spray and rubber bullets, and parts of the Melbourne CBD were brought to a standstill.
Greens leader Adam Bandt is yet to join everyone else in condemning the violence. That's because the Greens aren't Greenpeace. The Greens are the Soviet Socialist Alliance of Australia, and most of them would probably be quite happy if every right-wing Aussie just dropped dead tomorrow. The protest happened at the Melbourne Convention Centre outside the Land Forces International Land Defence Expo. They're basically protesting against Australia and other Western countries' right to defend ourselves. So that's good. Channel 9 News reporter Reid Butler saw it this way.
They're anti-war, but today they waged one against Victoria Police and their horses. Officers fighting back.
They come here to protest against anti-war, so presumably anti-violence. The only way I can describe them is a bunch of hypocrites.
24 police officers were hurt, both from Victoria and interstate. They were pelted with missiles like bottles and rocks, even horse manure.
These geniuses think they're so clever that they see behind the Western world's lies. That because the CIA is a meddling train wreck of an organisation that's been out of control for 60 years, which may be true, that means America is by its very nature evil, and anyone who seeks to bring down the Western world order is a good guy with wholesome motives. The American experiment of a liberal representative democratic republic built upon Christian values, that is a rare and precious thing. Of course, there will be bad actors within that system and bad things done throughout history, but that doesn't mean that the whole thing is rotten. If you want to fix America, you maybe need to break up the big bloated national bureaucracies like the CIA and FBI and reform them to be more accountable. And the last time I checked, there was only one presidential candidate who's anti-establishment enough to actually make that happen. And it sure isn't the left-wing side of politics. 2,000 Victoria police officers, some on horseback, had to use rubber bullets, pepper spray and batons, and they really struggled to keep the crowd under control. Protesters were setting wheelie bins on fire, blocking the roads and vandalising nearby hotels, and grabbing police horses' reins, throwing manure at the cops and generally assaulting all the police. The Victorian Police Commissioner Shane Patton told ABC News.
They were shoved, they had bottles thrown at them, they had balloons thrown at them that had different liquids in them. We've had analysis that shows some type of low-level acid that caused irritants to the police was used. A whole range of different attacks on my police officers.
The US and Western European world order has been the most successful in the entire history of mankind in creating wealth, freedom and peace for the maximum number of people. And it's far from perfect. You're not Einstein for noticing that it's far from perfect, kiddies. Global trade and capitalism, though, has lifted billions of people out of poverty and misery and enslavement caused by authoritarian government centralised systems. But these protesting geniuses still think that supporting big government socialist models will create wealth and happiness and freedom. No, it won't. It can't by definition. It never has in practice ever. So if you really want to stop wars and you're a bit concerned about the commercialisation of weapons technology and the military-industrial complex, join the club. But it was ever thus, all through human history. So the radical left have to stop being so naive and dumb and childish and look at where we are in the full context of, as Kamala Harris likes to say, where we have been. Nine News' Reid Butler was one of the very few reporters to actually notice that the protesters weren't looking for peace in Melbourne. They want confrontation, violence and maximum disruption. They're deluded souls who believe that the best thing is to just tear it all down like a pack of little spoiled children with no plan of what they're going to put in its place. How Bolshevik of them.
It may sound odd, but this is actually what protesters have been wanting. They want the confrontation. They've been goading the officers to charge them for the best part of an hour now, and it looks like it is finally happening. This was midday in Melbourne, the protest capital.
To behave in such a disgraceful way towards members of Victoria Police, they deserve to be treated absolutely with respect.
Dealing with a group of dirty, filthy, disgusting animals who have simply come to Melbourne today to cause havoc, anarchy.
Well done, Reid Butler and Channel 9. And it doesn't sound odd, mate. It's in the history books. It's all been done before. It's never worked. Yet they keep on trying. The world is not a nice place. Evil exists. We unfortunately need defence technology to keep us ahead of our enemies. And our enemies are people like Hamas, who think it's a great idea to take billions of dollars of other countries' money, given to it in the spirit of goodwill by the people of America, Europe, Australia and others, to build their new state, and spend 18 years wasting that money and opportunity, building tunnels and arming up to destroy their neighbour instead of building a thriving city to enrich and prosper their people. Our enemies sit in Tehran and Moscow and Beijing, seeking to take away the rights of their own people and eventually all of us by shoving their ideology of authoritarian control, Islamism or communism, down our necks. So if you don't believe in the West and you don't want to defend the West and the liberal democratic order from these threats, you simply shouldn't be in the West. Folks, something else happened this week, something that, as usual, got overlooked pretty much by the mainstream news here in Australia because it's all too hard to explain. But the US Secretary of State, their equivalent of our Foreign Affairs Minister, Antony Blinken, has met with his new UK Labor Party government counterpart, the British Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. In a news conference during the visit late this week, Secretary Blinken revealed that in a move that kind of brings the two big global hotspots of Ukraine and the Middle East closer together, a little bit strategically, Iran has been selling ballistic missiles to Russia. That is a violation of multiple UN security resolutions.
We've warned Tehran publicly, we've warned Tehran privately, that taking this step would constitute a dramatic escalation. Dozens of Russian military personnel have been trained in Iran to use the Fata 360 close-range ballistic missile system, which has a maximum range of 75 miles. Russia has now received shipments of these ballistic missiles and will likely use them within weeks in Ukraine against Ukrainians.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He says this development threatens European security more broadly, and it shows how Iran's destabilizing influence extends beyond the Middle East. But there's another serious implication too.
For its part, Russia is sharing technology that Iran seeks. This is a two-way street, including on nuclear issues, as well as some space information. In recent days, we've been sharing intelligence behind these findings with our allies and partners, and working together to ensure that there will be significant economic consequences for Tehran's actions.
This news comes 2 months after Blinken indicated that Iran was only weeks away from having the material they needed to build a nuclear weapon. Thank you, Joe and Kamala. Well done. Your Iran strategy is right up there with your Afghanistan strategy. Joe Biden and UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer will meet in Washington this weekend, Australian time. They will likely discuss whether to ease restrictions that currently prevent Ukraine using long-range weapons to attack inside Russian territory. The US is going to hit Iran with fresh sanctions now for selling those ballistic missiles to Putin, and it's urging allies to do the same. Blinken also announced that he'll join UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy on the first joint UK-US visit to Ukraine.
We are the closest of allies, so I'm delighted that we will travel together, demonstrating our commitment to Ukraine. And on the Middle East, we are completely aligned on the need to secure that ceasefire.
That's the UK's Foreign Secretary David Lammy. In a later interview with Sky News UK, Blinken addressed the Gaza conflict directly.
Just as I fully understand the hue and cry from so many parts of the world about Israel needing to do much better by Palestinians who are suffering, if maybe 10% of that time was actually spent demanding that Hamas get out of the way, that it put down its arms, that it stop hiding behind civilians, that it stop using civilian sites to do its operations and planning, that it get out of the schools, get out of the safe areas, that would be helpful too. I've heard virtual silence since October 7th on that. That is not to justify any actions that Israel may have taken, but it is to say there is silence.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken speaking with UK Sky News' Yalda Hakim. Private internet access is terrific. With all the big government clampdown on online speech lately, you are taking a big risk if you don't have a VPN. That's a virtual private network. And it blocks spying eyes in big government or big corporate from seeing your IP address and hacking into your data. Now, it's super easy and cheap to set it up. It's not technical. Even I could do it. And even if you already have a VPN, you should consider switching to these guys, because since I have had zero reduction in my internet speeds, which was a bit of a problem with the one I was using before. And I don't even have to think about this one. It's just on automatically whenever I turn on my computer. And even better news is that the other side has secured a special deal for you, which will get you set up for 83% off the usual price and with 4 months free. And get this, that brings the price down to less than $3 a month. It is absolutely amazing. So jump on it now, sign up to our special deal and help support us by supporting our sponsors. PIAVPN.com/otherside. PIAVPN.com/otherside. So the federal government is going to try to achieve something that parents and teachers have failed to do for years. They think they can stop kids using social media. Good luck with that. But of course the state can fix everything, folks. Just ask your local neighbourhood Marxist. As usual, they'll impose this restriction on liberty in the name of keeping us safe and healthy. Tyranny always comes dressed in kindness and niceness. The Prime Minister said his main concern is the mental health of our kids. And who could argue with that? Nobody, of course. Not even our federal opposition that doesn't do much oppositioning these days, it seems.
The Coalition announced in June our plan to stop young children from gaining access to harmful social media content. The Prime Minister has been incapable of taking action on this important issue for months. Yesterday, Premier Malinauskas said he'd had enough of waiting for the Prime Minister to make a decision. Now, today, in a rushed and ham-fisted way, the government has made a partial announcement of a policy without detail. Why is the Albanese government hopeless at everything?
Numbers on my right.
The trial
Groom
of age verification
the member for
technology to make sure that we actually get this right. You need to trial the technology. This is something that has been a scourge of young people in particular throughout the Western world. It is something that governments are grappling with throughout the Western world.
Yes, and if you believe that governments, not parents and teachers, should be raising your kids, that would concern you. That clip from the Guardian newspaper's YouTube channel. But the reason governments are grappling with this is that government really shouldn't be centrally censoring social media. Parents should be.
This is about giving children a childhood and giving parents peace of mind.
Oh, of course it is. It's got nothing to do with giving the state more control and parents less, and government bureaucrats more access to our kids. Nothing to do with that at all. And don't expect the Liberal National Coalition to push back on any of this. They're very happy to see your rights being further eroded. The Uni Party is on fire at the moment. One of Peter Dutton's biggest image issues is the perception that while he is a stronger conservative and economics free market defender than most of the centre-left who've infiltrated the Liberal Party, he is seen as a bit of a big state authoritarian who's a little too fond of surveillance and using technology to spy on the people. Many social media commentators say it's the ex-copper in him. It would be wise for Mr Dutton to stop supporting the eSafety Commissioner, Julie Inman-Grant, and create a strong differentiation for himself on the issues of privacy and abuse of technology by Big Brother government and corporations that so deeply concern so many Australians right now. But a slight majority of Australians love the nanny state. Polling from YouGov and the ABC shows support for an age-based social media ban is running at 61%. Having never lived under the truly bad government system so many other people in the world have had to live under, most Australians see government as a force for good. And we love being taken care of by mummy and daddy in Canberra. Our country is run more like a high school than a liberal democratic nation of free-thinking and acting independent adults. Sorry guys, but it is true, and it just slowly keeps getting worse and worse. We seem to love government control. Here's one of my favourite American comedians, John Funches, on that one.
Now there's just certain people I have no time for. Like if you're sexist or homophobic, or if you don't believe in conspiracy theories. Just don't understand, how do you not believe in any conspiracy theories? I understand not all of them, not most of them, but you don't believe in any conspiracy theories? You just think the government's just batting 1,000 and telling us the whole truth? That's a strong stance to take.
That's Ron Funches, sorry, not John. I think I said John, on Comedy Central. Anyway, back to the story. Laws will be introduced to Parliament later this year before the next election, and they will very likely have bipartisan support. The Liberals are all for this stuff, so you get no choice, folks, unless you vote for One Nation or the Libertarians. The new legislation follows a report by former High Court Chief Justice Robert French on exactly how to do this ban. That report was commissioned by the South Australian Labor state government because both Victoria and South Australia already want to bring in similar laws at a state level. The report was released last Sunday and it contains draft legislation for banning kids under 14 from social media completely and requiring parental consent for 14 and 15-year-olds. So this is happening. Okay, so banning teenagers from woke corporate and communist brainwashing and porn pimps can't be too bad a thing, right? Well, the problem is that this sets the stage for something deeper and more sinister. The popular Substack page, Dystopian Down Under, reports all of this is tied in with the age verification roadmap, which in turn is tied in with Australia's recently legislated digital ID framework. The government is spending almost $300 million on that between now and 2028. Can you see where all this might be heading? No social media privacy whatsoever. Everything you say and do online tagged to your ID number. A government utopia of information control. The e-safety mob have already told the social media industry that they have until the end of this year to propose new industry codes that'll be enforceable by e-safety to limit children's access to inappropriate content online. Okay, so long as that's where it stops. My problem is we never hear Julie Inman Grant and her e-safety posse talk about how they're going to regulate themselves from potential overreach into our privacy and civil liberties while they're working to ban all the bad stuff. And I find that attitude very troubling. On another point, Dystopian Down Under also reports that some experts say that banning kids' access to social media will cause unintended harms. Dr. Dana McKay of RMIT University says that social media is one of the only public spaces where some children can communicate directly with their friends, often maintaining connections with distant friends and loved ones that would otherwise be impossible. And as the dad of expat kids, I can tell you this is very important. We live in a more globalised world than we did even 20 years ago. Dr. McKay says instead of banning kids from social media completely, the focus should be on making the social media more safe. Did you know that for roughly every 2 nurses in Australia working hard to save lives and take care of the sick on the front line, there's 1 taxpayer-funded bureaucrat sitting behind a desk doing admin and making and enforcing rules and regulations? That's right, nearly 1 bureaucrat for every 2 frontline nurses. In most countries, it's 1 bureaucrat for 10 frontline nurses. That's how bloated our public services become. But you'll never hear about it from the regular nurses' unions because they also represent many of those public servants. So says the leading alternative nurses union in Australia, the NPAA. If you're a nurse, it's time to change to a union that will not only look after you without using your money to support the Labor Party, but which is taking on the government health systems to sidestep the bureaucrats and use the savings to pay all nurses 25% more. That's what they want to do. The current waste has got to stop. All the red tape doesn't just suck up resources and time, it actually means that the nurses left on the front line have got to jump through more hoops and it stops them from being able to do their jobs properly. Admin is a hindrance. So join the union that will actually stand up against bloated government. Join the NPAA, the Nurses Professional Association, will make hospitals locally autonomous and run by elected boards. To find out more, just Google NPAA. The NPAA's fees are half the price because none of your money goes to any political party. And as an Other Side viewer, if you use our special code OTHERSIDE1 when you sign up, you will get the first 3 months free or $100 off your annual payment. Go to npaaredunion.com and sign up now for a better union and support the other side too by supporting our sponsors. Thank you, nurses, you legends. One of the most sad and tragic news stories we've heard in a while this week. 2 young boys, aged 9 and 11, found dead in a Blue Mountains home by their dad after allegedly being murdered by their mother. We don't report crime news on this show, so we'll leave all of that to the mainstream media. But this is a horrible tragedy, and it may have many, many complex reasons behind it. What I do want to focus on, and couldn't help but notice, is the fact that this has not unleashed a wave of calls for all women to collectively check themselves and apologise for family violence against men. It has not unleashed hundreds of millions of dollars in government funding to organisations tasked with protecting men from female violence. And nor should it. That would be absurd. But so is it just as absurd that every time a man murders a woman in a domestic setting, we get the wider narrative of all men needing to atone for their toxic masculinity. Crimes aren't committed by genders. Crimes aren't committed by men or women. They are committed by people, sick people or evil people. And the gendering of crime, in order to feed an identity politics divisive narrative of fake sexism, so that politicians like Albo can look all sensitive and caring, and social organisations peddling left-wing narratives of hate and division against straight white men can get funding. Yes, I just said the quiet part out loud. And as you'll see in a second, I'm not the only one noticing. But first, a recap. A few months ago, we reported on the crime stats on this show, and the data simply does not support the narrative being shoved down our throats by the ABC and the rest of the left-wing media and all the bureaucrats and all the activists that the problem of intimate partner homicide is getting worse. It isn't. Or that all men are somehow to blame. They aren't. Or that Australia has any kind of toxic male cultural problem. It doesn't. The latest homicide data from the Australian Institute of Criminology showed, when it was released back in May, this is the rate of homicides in Australia per 100,000 people from 1989 on the left of the chart to 2023 on the right. Back in 1989, you had a 1.8 in 100,000 chance of being murdered in this country. Today, it's less than half that. Half. That's massive, and we should be celebrating it. Between the 1st of July 2022 and the 30th of June last year, there were 232 homicides, giving us a rate of 0.87 per 100,000. But what about domestic violence-related homicide? What about intimate partner homicide, the radical feminists will argue? Surely that's gone up. We all know that. I mean, well, actually, no. Homicides are classified into domestic, meaning an intimate partner, a relative, or someone living with you; acquaintance, meaning someone you know not living with you; and a stranger. This chart shows all three types, and the rates from 1989 to 2023 for each type. The dark green line is domestic. The light green line is acquaintance. They have both dropped massively since 1989. The rate of domestic homicide in 2022-23 was 0.3, and the acquaintance homicide rate decreased to 0.24, the lowest since 1989, when it was 2.5 times that. As you can see from the grey line at the bottom, the type of homicide that hasn't dropped is stranger homicide. And the victims of stranger homicide are significantly mostly men. It's probably the gender of the victims. That must be where women victims are on the rise. Oh, no, that's also falling. Most victims of homicide in Australia are still male. In 2023, male victims were 69% of homicides, 171 out of the 232 murders overall. That puts the male victim rate at 1.29 per 100,000, and the female rate is at 0.56, well less than half. And over time, it's just more really good news. Since 1989, the rate of male victimisation halved, and the rate of female homicide victimisation decreased by more than half at 58%. Okay, well, that was from our show back in May. Cognitive dissonance, anyone? Feeling a little bit sceptical? It's weird, isn't it? When you see the actual data, it makes you shocked to realise that you've been lied to for so long, the victim of an actual PR campaign and an industry, if you like. Big government likes creating industries and bureaucracies. But as I said, we're not the only ones noticing.
Australian men are getting screwed in every way except the way they'd really like.
That's Bettina Arndt speaking at the recent Restoring the Presumption of Innocence conference in Sydney.
Sex has become such a battleground. We're absolutely weaponised against men. Women are taught to see themselves victims, cowering from dangerous men. In New South Wales at the moment, the sex most people have most of the time is now illegal. We have affirmative consent laws, which means that if you've been married for 20 years, it is illegal for you to make love to your wife without checking every inch of the way for affirmative consent. Can I nibble your ear, dear? May I pull down your trousers? We don't do that in our normal relationship. And yet zealots have marched into our bedrooms wearing jackboots and declared that is how we should behave. What we're seeing in Australia now, sexual consent is being taught in all our schools, teaching girls that boys are all potential predators. And as a result of that, we've seen a huge spike in sexual assault cases flooding into our courts.
Of course, the rise in the number of sexual assault cases in courts is used as an evidence point by the activists that a growing problem exists. Look, the number of cases is rising. There must be a growing problem. But it seems, looking at the data we just showed you, that the problem is getting better and the impression of a growing problem has been created.
Think about what happens to a man who's been accused of this sort of a crime. He's publicly named and shamed. They lose their careers, their reputations, their friends. Their families often spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend these cases. We've got people in this room today whose loved ones have been through this sort of dreadful ordeal or who've been through it themselves. And every week I hear from dozens of these people and it breaks my heart. We're in the grip of a moral panic, an orchestrated campaign to create hysteria about women not being safe. And it's absolutely a feminist campaign. It's part of a long-running attack on male sexuality. The 19th century suffragettes had a slogan, votes for women, chastity for men. I mean, think about that craziness.
Bettina Arndt speaking at the recent Restoring the Presumption of Innocence conference in Sydney. The feminists, the radical crazy ones, tried to shut the conference down but had no luck. Good. As we approach the election, you'll see the old narrative re-emerging now. Albo will be falling over himself backwards to look like the man who understands, the ally of the feminists. He'll be manipulating the more gullible women voters into voting Labor and painting Peter Dutton and the Liberal Nationals yet again of being a pack of misogynists, blah, blah, blah. Watch out for the, quote, the Liberals have a women problem narrative, 2024-25 version, coming to a TV screen near you soon. This stuff never gets tired for the left. The same old tricks, division, identity politics, rehashed every election. This time, we need to call it out. The coalition needs to just call it out, not cower in terror from the feminazis and their beta male allies. There's absolutely huge money in this game. The so-called National Cabinet meeting this week, the meeting of the Prime Minister and the Premiers and Chief Ministers of the territories, announced a, sit down, are you sitting down? Okay, $4.7 billion with a B dollars plan to combat domestic violence. That's 4,700 times $1 million of your money if you happen to be a taxpayer. Wow. To combat something that actually isn't getting worse, according to the actual real-world data. It's incredible. And the PM was all over it, even telling male journalists to take a back seat at the National Cabinet News Conference, as Sky News' Denica DiGiorgio reported this week on the Prime Time show.
Today, the Prime Minister announced a $4.7 billion plan to address domestic violence at today's National Cabinet. But there was an odd moment in his press conference which struck my attention when he was picking which journalists to go for. This is what he said.
Just in front of you.
I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm deliberately going
to women before blokes.
Prime Minister. You know, Tina, so he's deliberately going to female journalists over male journalists, assuming because this was a domestic violence announcement. I mean, I think this is ridiculous. It's virtue signalling at its finest. Who is he trying to please here?
Oh, it infuriates me. And if he thinks he's going to get the female vote by doing that, he won't, because women do not appreciate it. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the money they're throwing at domestic, money isn't going to solve the issue. You know, a lot of these domestic violence start in homes where there is struggling with their house payments, those very issues we discussed in the first part of the program. So try and fix those, and maybe that'll alleviate some of the problems. And also don't forget, a lot fewer men, but men can be victims of domestic abuse as well.
Yes.
It's a very complex issue, and to do that is just a disgrace, and it's not going to win him any favours with the female voters of Australia.
Well, I really hope Tina McQueen is correct there in those comments on Sky News, but I'm not so sure. This cheesy stuff works. There's a lot of very stupid people out there that don't dig beneath the surface of anything that's being thrown at them. And that's why the left keep doing this stuff. Never let a little thing like the facts and reality get in the way of an excellent political narrative and $5 billion of taxpayer funding. You can catch us here on The Other Side every Friday night from 7 p.m. on YouTube. If you'd like to support us, the best way is to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. It's absolutely free. All you've got to do is just lift your finger and hit that subscribe button right now. I mean it, like just do it right now. And the little bell too. And the little bell actually works because it notifies you when we post anything. So you'll get a little reminder that there's new content from The Other Side for you to watch. Also, if you're feeling generous, feel free to send us a super thanks donation. You can do that by clicking the little $sign, and we do definitely need that kind of support as well. If you can spare a buck or two in these difficult times. There's a little thanks icon, $sign thanks icon under the video frame on YouTube. We'll have more ways that you can sponsor us coming up in the weeks ahead. We're working on our own platform as well at the moment, so you'll be able to follow us on that as well, and also follow us on X, the old Twitter, at The Other Side on X. And just remember, the show comes out in full every Friday night at 7 p.m, our 1 hour or so show, and then we segment the show throughout the week and drop the segments one at a time from Saturday through to Thursday. So every night there's content coming out, depending on which way you like to watch, whether you like to sit down and watch it all in one hit on Friday or watch it in segments throughout the week. It's totally up to you, and all your support really does help. Poor old Environment Minister and Prime Ministerial wannabe Tanya Plibersek. She's been having a bit of a tough time of it lately, all because she thought it'd be a good idea to just wake up one day and put the kibosh on $1 billion gold mine that was set to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into the New South Wales economy. The mine in the central west New South Wales town of Blaney was all but approved. It was going to bring, as Nationals leader David Littleproud pointed out in the Telegraph editorial this week, not just wealth and prosperity to that little local town, but an important signal to the resources sector in Australia and all around the world that this country, Australia, is a safe bet for investment, and that the government has your back if you put a little money in. The Australian mining company, Regis Resources, spent years jumping through hoops to get the mine approved, all that red tape, green tape, rainbow tape, sprinkle a little BEI bull dust. And then at the very last minute, our brilliant Albanese government decided, not today. No mine for you. Mr. Littleproud notes that Tanya Plibersek first put her decision down to an Indigenous heritage issue. That didn't work out when a leading local elders said that there was no Indigenous heritage issue. So now she says, it's actually an environmental issue. Never mind that the Labor government had given the mine all of the approvals and had actually given them the approvals process to follow, and the mine had already met all of the requirements. Even the minister's own department, the Environment Department, approved it. The Nationals leader points out that even the Indigenous group that opposed the mine had previously been given a hearing, and they were afforded due process as well. This whole thing is a clown show train wreck. It sends a terrible message about Australia to the world, and in my humble opinion, Plibersek really should be given the boot over this. As Little Proud notes, every single resources company is watching Blaney and wondering if and when they will be next. So poor old Tanya is in deep doo-doo. Time to call in the PR team. And the Labor Party has a free PR team paid for by your tax dollars. It's called the ABC. It's puff piece time. Hit it, Laura Tingle.
Federal environment ministers might often be seen as the ones responsible for fluffy animals and picture opportunities. But the legislation they oversee actually makes them one of the most powerful ministers in the government, and that doesn't always win them a lot of fluffy friends.
Oh, it's hard being a minister. Poor Tanya.
There will be times as a minister that I make decisions that you like. There will be times as a minister that I make decisions that you don't like. But hard decisions are a part of this job, and I'm not going to shy away from them. What you get from me and from this government, though, is a commitment to carefully weigh the evidence, to listen to advice, and most importantly, to apply the law, and a commitment to make approvals that are quicker and easier wherever we can.
Apply the law. Well, yes, but you're not a judge, Tanya. You're the minister. We elected you. You also make the law on our behalf. Remember that bit? And it's a bit rich to talk about making quicker decisions when you pull the rug out of a project at the last minute after 4 years of approvals and planning processes. But the sympathetic narration from Laura Tingle and the soft, sad music tells us that Tanya is just the victim of the laws of the land. She's not the person responsible for changing the laws. It's quite fascinating.
Tanya Plibersek currently occupies the hot seat. The Environment Protection and Biodiversity Act, or EPBC, gives the Minister of the Day sole discretion over environmental decisions. That has put her at the centre of two separate but related storms engulfing politics just now.
Could you imagine if Laura was doing this 7:30 report piece on a Conservative male politician? Different music. You wouldn't have that nice piano. You'd have that sort of ominous, dark, moody shadows and everything like Four Corners do. It'd be very, very different. Okay, now things get a little confusing, so bear with me while I try to explain this. The EPBC, that's the body that Tanya Plibersek oversees, and that body operating under the current laws gives her sole total power over projects. She can just snap her fingers and say, the minister can just go, no, we're vetoing that. Now, weirdly, the minister doesn't actually want that power. They'd rather have an agency at arm's length. Then they'd be able to say that the Environmental Agency made the decision and there's nothing we can do about it. And we wouldn't want to interfere because that wouldn't be appropriate. See how that works? Then they don't have to take responsibility for any of these dumb decisions and cop the rightful political flack for them. They look virtuous for not interfering in an independent statutory authority. Never mind that we vote them in to make decisions and take responsibility and make the laws, not just follow them like little victims. But back to Laura Tingle's 7:30 report, PR puff piece for Labor.
The federal opposition sought to overturn the decision in the Senate this week, but the move was defeated by the government and crossbench. But the conflict and competing claims around the Blaney project have formed the backdrop to the Parliament's consideration of Labor's overhaul of federal environment laws. The expectation was that the government would completely rewrite the EPBC Act, but the government ultimately choked on that decision earlier this year and deferred it, arguing instead that it first needed to establish a new independent body which would assess environmental claims.
At the moment, the Minister makes every decision when it comes to environmental approvals. The Environment Protection Agency will be set up as an independent statutory authority. That means there'll be less political pressure on the EPA when it's making decisions.
Yeah, less public representation too. All so independent this new EPA would be, and more of the power in this country handed to the bureaucrats, the bureaucratic elites in Canberra. Also, it has the added benefit of taking the hot potato out of the hands of the government. Nice one. A point that, weirdly, being such an experienced political reporter, Laura Tingle just, well, somehow seemed to not notice. Weird.
That was Tanya Plibersek announcing the new body in April. Now, with WA the biggest battleground in the looming federal election, hostility to the new body has been growing from both the opposition and miners. During a recent visit to WA, the PM raised the possibility of a backdown, that the new body would just make recommendations rather than decisions in the hope of getting opposition support. Good luck with that.
Wow. Okay, so just completely biased editorialising again from your ABC. See, folks, that's not really okay. This show is self-funded. It runs on a shoestring. It's a commentary show, not a news show, and it declares even its centre-right bias right up front. The ABC 7:30 Report is a news current affairs show funded by money taken by force from you, the taxpayers, in many cases against our will. I don't want to give them a cent, but I have to. And it has a charter to report in a fair and balanced way. So what Laura Tingle is doing there is not just not okay, in my view, it's bordering, in my humble opinion, on criminal. And we need to do something about it. This simply cannot continue. The ABC must be fixed. Or perhaps a good idea would be to just, sell it to the staff. Let them have it, okay? Keep the real estate, let the staff have it, tell them they've got to run it, they've got to keep it funded themselves, but they can have it, it's a gift. Off you go. You got your playpen, but you're going to have to maintain it yourselves. At the moment, it's just out of control. Let's just run that clip again.
The PM raised the possibility of a backdown, that the new body would just make recommendations rather than decisions in the hope of getting opposition support. Good luck with that.
Labor is worried. They are paranoid about losing votes to Green candidates in inner city seats. So the party is looking to shore up that constituency ahead of an election. And the problem is that you pay the price for it. A Dutton coalition government will be the best friend that the mining and resources sector in Australia will ever have. I stand unashamedly with Australia's resources sector.
Opposition leader Peter Dutton getting a little airtime there on the ABC. On Thursday, the new laws to set up the new EPA with teeth were effectively pulled from the Senate's agenda for the past week's Parliament sitting. The three bills were on the list all week. They were supposed to be brought in on the Senate, into the Senate at 10 o'clock on Thursday morning. The Australian newspaper reports that the explanation offered was that the Senate business was rearranged at the last minute just to prioritise Albanese's future Made in Australia legislation. Okie dokie. You see, to get these laws passed, Labor has to do a deal with the Greens. And they want this new EPA to have the power to pull a mine based on some kind of climate measures. And they want to end to native forest logging completely included in that EPA's remit. The Greens ought to have no such power. They are punching well above their public mandate, and that is immoral and wrong. The Business Council of Australia said the Greens could devastate the Australian economy if Labor lets them go down this path. Analysts say Albanese is not up for a big fight on this, and he's told Plibersek as much. The Labor premiers of WA and South Australia and New South Wales are all not happy with their federal colleagues because of the risk to the mining industry. One thing is for sure, Kamala Plibersek is way out of her depth. Another example of why career politicians with no real-world or business work experience are a very, very bad thing for our nation. With all the government crackdown on freedom of speech and digital IDs and marketing companies manipulating your information, you would be crazy not to have a virtual private network on your laptop and phone. In fact, all of your devices. I was once a bit afraid of how these things work, that they might, slow down my internet speed or be too complicated to set up. But private internet access is terrific. And when you buy from them, you're supporting the other side too, because they're one of our sponsors. So to help keep yourself safe from big government and big corporations with a VPN, get onto private internet access. We have done a fantastic deal just for other side viewers. You're going to get 83% off the usual price and 4 months free. That brings it down to just $2.68 a month, a half a cup of coffee. It's amazing. You just got to use the special access code that you can see on your screen right now. That is piavpn.com, piavpn.com/other side, and you'll get that discount if you do that, okay? It's super easy to download, super easy to get running. Literally just takes a few minutes, and it's always on. It didn't slow down my internet speed one bit. And a side benefit is that I can now watch Netflix using my Netflix account as if I'm in any country in the world, which opens up the whole global Netflix library to me. And best of all, by using PIA, you're supporting the other side in a very big way and helping us to keep on providing an alternative to the mainstream media focused on Aussie news. piavpn.com/other side. Get on it. Okay, just a warning that this next segment is not really appropriate for young kids, although our government seems to think it is. Last year on the show, we told you about a book being used in some Australian primary schools and being stocked in the kids sections of libraries around the country and being sold on full display at Big W to teach children about sex, and it way overstepped anything that the state should be teaching your kids. The book was authored by the radical far-left extremist Yumi Stynes. It's all full of colour and cartoons and pretty pictures, and it covers topics such as blowjobs, anal sex, and the lesbian practice of scissoring. I said last year that it's actually good for older teenagers to learn about this stuff in a mature way rather than from classmates, perhaps. But I really believe it's the domain of conversations with parents and guardians, not teachers. And it's not for younger kids. Big W were stocking it on full display, but then made it only available online when the controversy blew up. Stynes is on record as saying that she would, quote, be happy with a mature and smart 8-year-old having a flick through. No, sorry, it is not appropriate for any 8-year-olds or anyone under about 14 or so. And of course, the book is full of unscientific gender ideology nonsense. Stynes spoke to your SBS at the time.
I make no apologies for the book. I'm very proud of it. Educating people about sex doesn't make them go out and want to do the thing that they've been educated about. It really doesn't. It's been checked and rechecked and tested and scientifically, statistically proven that the earlier people get sex education that's comprehensive and science-based, the later that they'll actually have sex, and that sex will be safer and consensual, more likely.
The great Australian intellectual Yumi Stynes there. She may be right, but I don't see how exposing kids to gender ideology and unusual sexual techniques is okay, particularly in cartoon form. And I'm no prude, but there is a line, folks, and people keep wanting to cross it more and more and more. I don't have an issue with what adults want to do in the privacy of their own home. That is none of the government's business either. But the most shocking thing about all of this is that following a week in which the Prime Minister has been morally grandstanding about what kids are exposed to on social media and the need for more censorship power to the government, the Australian Prime Minister's Literary Awards, I repeat, the Australian Prime Minister's Literary Awards has included this particular book among its nominated books for a 2024 award. Yep, you heard me, Albo's Literary Awards. Hooray! And why wouldn't it be in there? The publisher's blurb makes it clear that the book is about much more than sex. It's about left-wing identity politics ideology. Quote, welcome to sex is inclusive, intersectional, multicultural, reassuring, and all about keeping sex fun, covering a wide range of gender, sexuality, and disability, the publishers gush. Even better, the book is a nominee in the juvenile category, and it will win, no doubt, just as stick it to conservatives for being, conservative. The Comedy Central show Alternatino had this take a few years back on what it's like for dads in the modern era to have the old birds and the bees talk with their sons.
When boys and girls get a little older, they start getting interested in one another.
right?
And non-binary people, agendered, intergendered, FTX, gender fluid people.
What?
There's more than just boys and girls now, Dad. And they're not girls, they're women.
Yeah, okay, sure. Well, my point is that sex is it's a very important decision.
How are you defining sex? Sex is different things to different people. What if there's 2 men or 2 women or more?
More?
How would you define sex with multiple simultaneous partners? Or what if somebody's undergone genital reconstruction or is intersex?
No, but I'm just talking about normal, straight.
Normal. Come on, Dad.
Okay, here we go. Let me ask you this. Son, are you attracted to women?
Yes, but I'm young.
Is Emily a woman?
Biologically.
Okay, you're attracted to women. Emily's a woman. So if you were to have sex with Emily...
I wouldn't just have sex with Emily. We'd have to make that decision together. Homecoming's not an excuse to ignore consent.
I'm not saying to ignore consent. I never said ignore consent.
It'd be funny if it wasn't so true and serious. You can catch us here on The Other Side every Friday night from 7 p.m. on YouTube. If you'd like to support us, the best way is to support our sponsors. One of them is Public Internet Access, piavpn.com/otherside to get 83% off your internet security. Another way to support us is to tell all your friends about the show, that they can catch up on the best news and commentary of the week without the woke in just an hour by watching or listening to The Other Side every weekend. And also, do please subscribe to our channel on YouTube. It's free and it really, really helps us. Just hit the subscribe button and the little bell too, and that'll notify you when we post anything. And if you're feeling a little bit generous, feel free to send us a super thanks donation. You can do that by clicking the little $ thanks icon under the video frame on YouTube. You can also follow us on X, at Twitter, at The Other Side on X. It all helps. One of my favourite commentators to have on the show is the University of Queensland School of Law Professor James Allen, and it's been way too long since we've had him on. James, how are you going? Good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. Yeah, the time flies by.
It does. It sure does. We're going to discuss the wider implications of the big ruling in the federal court a couple of weeks ago in the Giggle versus Tickle case, which we'll explain later. But before we do that, being a man of North American origin, I wanted to ask you for your thoughts on a story that I've avoided like the plague this week because it's been covered to death by everybody else. But that's the Harris-Trump debate. My personal view is that I don't think it's going to change anyone's view of either of them. If you dislike Trump, you'll keep disliking him. And if you dislike Harris, you're probably going to keep disliking her. But what was your take?
Well, firstly, I tend to agree with you. Trump's been on the scene for 11 years. If you haven't got a take on him already. My short thing is, look, you can believe two things are true at the same time. Firstly, I've watched a lot of political debates and I've never seen moderators who were more biased and in the tank for one side. And secondly, Trump performed poorly. So on the second one first, on Trump, he's just too defensive. He's not a good debater. It's not his strength. Now, in the background, I personally wouldn't be voting for a good debater. I work in law schools and, loads of people are good debaters, and I wouldn't vote for any of them. I'm voting basically, I would be voting were I an American on bravery, and that's what I like about Trump. But he missed a lot of opportunities, and he let her provoke him. Sure, in many ways it was 3 against 1, and I can run through some of the sort of outrageous sort of levels of bias of the moderators, but he must have known that was coming. He knew he was going on to ABC. Disney hates Trump. They don't like DeSantis. And so, at one point she mocked the size of his rallies. And you just can't be in the game of defending how many people come to your rally. All he had to say was, look, some people like coming, some don't. But if we're going to speak about my rallies, the rhetoric of the Democrats has been so inflammatory that 2 weeks ago someone tried to shoot me. And they missed, luckily, but they killed an innocent person, a fireman. And he could have spent 5 minutes talking about the fireman.
Yeah, he did raise the fact that I liked that point when he made the point and reminded everybody that, it's the rhetoric that they've been spewing for years about him being a fundamental threat to democracy, our core institutions of democratic liberalism, the rule of law. I mean, if anybody's a threat to all of that, it's the lawfare and the abuse of institutions that we've seen on the other side, right?
Well, look, it's a stacked deck, and he knew that going in. I mean, you can see why someone would be angry. They've pursued him with the Russia collusion hoax. They had 51 former intelligence agencies knowingly lie in a letter about the Hunter Biden laptop. So you had the FBI, which knew it was true, basically have some influence on the 2020 election. Of course, the guy's angry. They're trying to put him in jail, but you go in. But you go into these debates and, you would have thought, don't get angry. And he did a poor job. Now, I tend to also agree. I read the Daniel Kahneman book, Thinking Fast and Slow. He's the sort of psychologist, the evolutionary psychologist who won the Nobel Prize in economics. And he points out how human brains at the margins misfire. The endowment effect, those sort of things. And one of the things he brought up that stuck with me when I read it was, when you're hiring someone for a job, you have usually a CV that shows you a lifetime of achievements, and you then have a 20-minute interview, and the human brain puts more weight on the interview than the CV. He said, all a 20-minute interview teaches you is what people who is good at a 20-minute interview might matter for a salesman. So if you vote based on who's a good debater, you would have wall-to-wall, hard left, sort of law professors. And I don't really think that's a big deal, but he could have done better. And anyone who said he'd perform well is just wrong. Now, will it matter? I think in The Spectator about 3 weeks ago, I wrote, this whole election boils down to whether the legacy media in the U.S. can drag her over the line, because it's public information in the U.S. how many people donate to which party. So they know the percentage of journalists who vote or donate Democrat, and it's over 90%. And it's well over 90. And so it's like a Pravda, but a willing Pravda. You don't have the excuse you're going to be put into the gulag. These people are just left, and to some extent, they will do anything to try to get Harris over. But he knew that going in, and he had to be a bit more disciplined. So I think he had a chance to finish her off, and he didn't. So it's now back to a 50-50 ball game. But as you say, very few people went into that debate watching it. And again, the numbers weren't great. It was like 55 million. It was way down on the viewership of the debates in 2020, which is an indication that people have made up their minds. I don't know.
I don't think, as I said, I don't think it's going to change anybody's mind of that debate terribly much. But I was expecting it to be the knockout blow. I thought it was going to show her up to be as shallow, and it certainly did show the shallowness and vacuousness of a lot of her content.
She basically came in and just didn't answer questions and had memorized these little spiels, which a better debater than Trump would have just said, you didn't answer the question. But they fact checked him 4 times I counted, but I've read more than that. Most of the fact checks were factually wrong. So when Trump said there are states in the U.S. with abortion at birth, 9th month, he's right. And they said he was wrong, and he's right.
I looked that up myself. There's quite a few that are determined. Yeah.
So they fact checked him on 2 or 3 other things that were wrong, and then a couple that are just opinion calls. Now, you can be a moderator and you can take one of 2 views. One is, I don't fact check anybody. That's for the journalists afterwards. I'm asking questions, and it's up to each party to say their bit, and afterwards we can, as journalists, comment on them. But they cut in on Trump. They actually got into arguments with Trump, and I think on the merits, Trump was right on every one of those, or it was a debatable opinion call. As for Harris, they didn't fact check her once, and I counted at least 7 blatant lies. Now, again, personally, I would, as a journalist, not fact check anyone, but you cannot just go after one side. And these, the male journalist who was one of the moderators, his show has been scored by a left of center media thing as being, since Harris took over, 100% positive about Harris and 93% negative about Trump. Trump had to know this. And so I don't think he performed particularly well. But again, here's the thing. You have 2 questions. One, do you think the voter turnout will be higher in 2024 than it was in 2020? If it's lower, I think Trump wins. Trump's ahead with, if you divide the electorate into 4 groups, he's way ahead with married men. He's ahead with married women. So married women vote Republican, they vote Trump. and he's ahead with single men. He's massively behind with single women. And that's true not just in the US, it's true of conservative parties across the Anglosphere, but not in Europe. And so the question is, I think it was before the debate, I think it was 68 Harris to 32 Trump of single women. So, when someone like Taylor Swift comes out and endorses Harris, who's she talking to? Is she convincing the 1/3 of single women who are brave enough to be concerned? I don't think so.
No.
But what do I know?
Yeah,
He
well,
has a terrible problem with single women, but I don't know that the debate changed that in any way. We'll see.
yeah. Yeah,
People
I
are
felt
pretty
he was targeting with his messages, Jim. I thought he was targeting the African American community, particularly men,
well,
and
he's winning.
the
He's doing very
and the
well.
Hispanic community with his jobs are being taken by immigrants line.
Yep.
I thought that was just a fairly strong message, but overall, non-verbally, he just looked too angry the whole time, and would have been better if we saw a bit of the old-fashioned Trump humor and levity.
Yeah, I mean, it would have even been fine if he'd said, "Look, yes, I am angry. I'm angry about what they're doing to our country, and I'm angry about what they're doing to me. So yes, I am angry."
Yeah.
He had to explain the anger.
But this is the problem with him, right? I mean, I always feel like he just can't get out of his own way. He's a man who has withstood so much.
Yeah.
He's policy-wise, I find him totally fine and inoffensive. I don't see any policies that I have serious concerns about. I think he's a business-minded person, which I'm certainly all for. He's center-right as far as I can see. Your classic New York Republican businessman.
He's more right than a New York Republican. Well, look,
Okay,
here's
it's more right
what
than you.
I would say. I mean, you buy people wholesale, not retail. It's not like you can you construct your ideal politician.
No.
And the qualities he brings to the table, incredible bravery. He's sacrificed a lot to
Absolutely.
and that kind of person is very rare. I mean, look around the rest of the Anglosphere. Where is the bravery amongst conservative politicians? It's almost invisible.
Well, I think you've got Polyev in Canada, but in Australia we've got nothing.
We've got nothing,
A
nothing.
little bit Dutton. I'll give Dutton some credit. I mean, he's,
Other than Farage, nothing in Britain. And so to say to that kind of a guy, you're too egocentric. Well, of course he's egocentric. What other kind of person would withstand that?
yeah.
And, he had to put up with, they're trying to put him in prison. They lied about him with the Russia collusion scam. So there's only a certain sort of person who have the qualities to withstand that. And then to say, okay, well, you have to completely change. That's not likely. He could be more disciplined, I agree. And he's not a good debater. He won in June against Biden because Biden, couldn't speak. But he's not a good debater. And again, do you care about debating to some
No,
extent?
you've got to you've got to take the good with the bad. I mean, I've worked in public relations and trained a lot of very, very senior executives with big, big egos. And it's very hard I'd hate to be trying to train the guy into doing what I say when he's, and I probably couldn't teach him anything he's probably way ahead in 90% of the time. But
just,
again, you've got to take the good with the bad. It's not, you're never going to get the 100%. And boy, next to Harris, he could have just shut up and let her talk, I thought, for like...
That would have been better.
Yeah.
The other thing viewers need to know is it's not a French presidential election where you just look at the popular vote. So California and New York are going into the Democrat column no matter what. And so Trump's poll numbers right now are better than they were in 2020. So at 50-50, you have to win the Electoral College, which means you win state by state, and almost all the states are winner take all, except for, I think, Nebraska and Maine. So if it's a 50-50 popular vote, the Republican wins. So she needs to be ahead by about 3 points in the polls to make it a toss-up. And as things stand right now, the entire election comes down to Pennsylvania, which is why all they talked about was fracking. So if Trump gets Pennsylvania, there is no path to the presidency for Harris. Right. If Harris gets Pennsylvania, there are paths to the presidency for Trump, but they're not going to be easy. So she needs to take Pennsylvania, and so does he. Because
okay, so that might be why Nate Silver, the poll analyst from 538.com, although he's been terribly wrong in the past, he has got Trump at a 65% probability of winning at the moment, even though.
Well, I haven't seen him since the debate. But look, if Trump
not since the debate, yeah, but
if Trump takes Georgia and North Carolina, which I think is very likely, then he wins with any one of the Midwest states. He wins with Pennsylvania, he wins with Michigan, and he wins with Wisconsin, any one of those three. But the easiest is Pennsylvania. So pretty much if you tell me right now who wins Pennsylvania, I would go out and bet on that person to win the election.
Yeah.
It's not 100%, but that's why I think he's going to park J.D. Vance in Pennsylvania from now till the election.
Probably not a bad strategy. We are joined by Professor James Allen from University of Queensland Law School. Jim, you wrote a piece for The Spectator magazine a couple of weeks ago back on the Giggle versus Tickle case ruling in the federal court, one of those names of a case that'll get giggles in law classrooms for the next few decades, I'm sure. For those who don't know, this was the case about the Women Only app and whether a transgender person that was born a man but who now calls himself a woman could actually force access to be able to be let in on that app through the courts. And Jim, you said it was no laughing matter. We need to take Giggle versus Tickle quite seriously. Why is that?
Well, of course, you're right. It is like a British sort of, carry-on movie title. It's, in that sense, it is a laughing matter, because if you'd asked people 15 years ago, would men be able to force their way into women's loos, and would men be able to force their way onto women's sports teams, they would have just laughed at you. I mean, if you don't think that men statistically are bigger, faster, stronger than women, with muscle twitch and all of that, I mean, here's a fact. The American women's soccer team about 8 years ago hadn't lost a match, in years. They were by far the best soccer team in the world for women. And they played a Dallas under 15 high school boys team, and they got crushed by the boys. So the idea, so it's so unfair. It's just, I played a lot of competitive sports growing up. I played university basketball. I was the shortest guy. I learned how to drink, curl, and because when you're hanging out with 6'8" guys, you really learn how to drink. But it's just so unfair, and it's just bizarre. And so in this case, there was it was an app, Women's Only, and this man who was in the process of taking drugs and having genitals removed, that sort of thing, but not yet, as far as I know, who identified as a woman. So whatever label you want to use, I refuse to use the touchy-feely woke cisgender type stuff.
You can't go to jail yet for that, but it's coming.
Well,
We'll
I'll ask to go into a women's prison. It might not be the end of the world. So this person first complains to the Australian Human Rights Commission, and there's no conciliation because they just say no. So then up to him, I'm going to call him him. I'm going to use the sort of pronouns linked to what you're born with. And he goes to the federal court, and he gets, of course, a judge who was appointed by George Brandis, the liberal attorney general, who gave us probably the weakest high court in this country's history. With, we're at a point where Labor makes better appointments to the bench than the Liberals. I don't really get it. But anyway, Bromwich is a Brandis appointee, and effectively the case was about the Sexual Discrimination Act. What you need to know is back in 2013, the Gillard government amends it, and effectively the Sexual Discrimination Act is set up to sort of protect groups against perceived historical discrimination. So women, other groups, but women. And Gillard, this big champion of women, adds gender identity to the list of protected groups. So women were protected, and they add gender identity. I think it was section 22 off the top of my head. And then there's also what did they call it? A special measures section in 5 or 7. And
so they took the Sex Discrimination Act, where it used to be you can't discriminate against. And in fact, I think there was a case prior to these amendments where I think well, I can't remember now, but it was deemed okay for a women's only gym to be women's only, and a man couldn't join the gym. Gillard made the amendments in 2013 to introduce this aspect of gender identity, and from that, I guess, was the judge hamstrung by that law? Did he have to sort of follow the legislation, or did he have wiggle room, do you think, in legal terms here to go in a different direction?
So my take is, firstly, the big problem is political. This comes in 2013, and we go through the Abbott, the Turnbull, the Morrison government. No one repeals this.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it?
Just amazing. You know, they just can't be bothered to fight the culture wars because, you know, really they're too busy selling us out on superannuation. But I meant that facetiously, of course.
Of course.
So if you assume there's a political problem, it could be fixed by just, you know, repealing the gender identity in the Sexual Discrimination Act. Hands up if you think a new coalition government will do that, and don't anyone put their hand up. Now, on the second part of your question, was the judge were the legal materials so clear that I don't think so, not even close. So again, the structure of the statute was first you identify protected groups, and one of them in section 22 is gender identity, and then there's special measures. So you can discriminate against men in favor of women because that's deemed to be a special measure for historical reasons, right? They didn't change that. And so the real question was, when they amended it in 2013, was it meant to apply to both the discrimination side and the special measure, or just the discrimination? And if you go back and look at the Hansard, or you look at the explanatory memorandum, it looks pretty clear that no one thought that the result was going to be what Justice Bromwich said. And of course, Bromwich uses the language of cisgender, and he invites in the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, newly appointed by Labour. He didn't have to do that, you know, as a amicus curiae, sort of friend of the court, and he basically accepts her interpretive view right down the line. And nothing in the precedent said he had to award $10,000 against the respondent, and you know she gets $50,000 in cost against her. So he certainly was, you know, if he'd been constrained, he certainly could have limited more than he did. But I don't think he was constrained. I don't think you could say his decision was not plausible or possible on the legal materials, but going the other way was also plausible. You know, the famous legal philosopher H.L.A. Hart wrote that rules generally deliver answers, but at some point they reach a set of facts where the honest truth is that the judge can go either way, and there's certainly plausible answers either way. And in those kind of cases, Hart said famously, the judge has discretion, and it sort of matters who you appoint to the bench. And maybe every single cabinet minister in the coalition should be forced to read H.L.A. Hart, you know, 15 times so they understand that it matters who you appoint to the court.
Yeah. How much do you think the fact that Tickle had her gender changed on her driver's license?
Well, that's what the judge said. I mean, the judge said the ordinary meaning of sex is changeable. That is laughable.
Yeah.
That is not the ordinary meaning of sex. So here's the basic rule.
It doesn't reflect the average Australian's view either. This is what annoys me. We've got an elite group of creeps in academia and in Canberra and obviously in the judiciary who are just buying into this gender ideology 100% without any concern for what the average man in the street feels.
So here's the background philosophical position I come from. You know, there are things that are imposed on us by the external causal world. It doesn't matter what you think. So gravity is real. If someone doesn't believe in gravity, take them to the 8th floor, let them jump. It's not imposed on us by, you know, men oppressing women or rich people oppressing poor people. There are facts about the world. And when it comes to things like how old you are, or whether your skin pigmentation is Caucasian, white, or black, it doesn't matter how you feel about the world. And for some reason, we all accept those two. If someone's 17 wants to play 12 and under rugby because he identifies as a 12-year-old, we just go, it doesn't matter. And so the problem here is, the fact of the world is, and I'm going to leave aside a few intersex cases like XXY or XY where the Y chromosome doesn't fire. Those are very sad cases, and you know we have to talk about those separately. But when it comes to this sort of case, the fact that you yourself feel that you ought to have been the other sex is neither here nor there. Now, I'm a live and let live guy. I don't care what people wear, and I really don't care how they live their life, up to the point where they ask you to deny facts about the world. So I'm not going to use pronouns where the pronoun suggests that I am lying about a truth about the world. And so when it really matters in things like who gets to play what sports, you have a lifetime of advantage once you've gone through puberty with testosterone and you have the faster muscle twitch, or, you know, going into lose, or, you know, women want to be able to be on an app by themselves. Why shouldn't they be able to do that? I mean, I watch sports with guys, and I think that we have to, truth matters more than hurting someone's feelings. And so that's the background here. And some people seem to think what's more important than truth about the external causal world is that we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And they use these euphemisms like I'm born in the wrong body. What does that even mean? When you pick it apart analytically, it's nonsensical. It might mean I wish I'd been a woman. You know, okay, fine, but you weren't. And so go ahead, live how you ever want, but don't force yourself into areas where there's a legitimate reason. So anyway, this is going on in the background. And this judge basically down the line, he takes an interpretive approach to statutory interpretation where, you know, the meaning in 2013, I think, was clear to everyone. It didn't cover this case. And because case law has adopted a view of what sex is in pensions cases, you know, he appeals to these cases, I think off the top of my head, you know, they were largely pensions cases and things. And he says, okay, so it's not sex isn't determined by what it means in the world. It's determined by what a few other judges in the past have said. That's a debatable call. And so I don't particularly like this decision. Now, it's not like the Love decision where it's just laughably ridiculous what the judges have done. So it's, you know, it's moderately defensible. It's one of these penumbral cases where I think the legal materials allow you to go either way, unlike Love where, you know, it's just laughably wrong and, you know, every judge who decided that way should have been, you know, dismissed. But so that's the situation. And again, if you say, were there things that the giggle crowd could have done differently? Yeah, they could have maybe set it up in a way that everyone could get on the app, right? Doesn't matter. And then you would apply like a men's only club to join a special part of the app. You know, there are ways where you might have been able to try to avoid the Bromwich judgment, but why should they have to do that?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Why should they have to set?
They shouldn't have to.
They could have taken the app offshore to the US. You know, there's things they could have done. But again, why should Australia be this shining beacon of wokery and complete capitulation to the forces of, I don't know, you know, PC?
I don't know, man. I don't know. It's a baffling thing. It's baffling to me. It really is. It's amazing. Anyway, Jim, great to talk to you as always, and I hope we get to have you back on the show real soon. Thanks for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Well, you know, we'll see you in prison down the road after this disinformation bill gets in place, because boy, is that ever bad. Wow.
Absolutely. All right, Professor James Allen, University of Queensland. And that's all we have time for this week on The Other Side, your weekly summary of the best news and commentary without the woke. Please remember to tell your friends about the show. Also, please follow us on X and YouTube. Please smash the like, subscribe, and every other button on all the platforms that you can. We drop a new show every Friday night at 7 p.m. and then the segments from that show throughout the week every night at 7 p.m. If you are watching on YouTube, to make sure you never miss any of our content, please hit that subscribe button and the little bell, and that'll notify you when we post new content, and it's totally free. And don't forget the super thanks button if you'd like to make a little donation and help us keep delivering. I'm Damien Curry. Bye for now.